I'm going to show you an interesting pattern that I call relaying, like in a sport competition when you have a relay between two runners. One runner being static rendering and the other being client-side rendering. Let me run an experiment that will show why it's necessary. I'm going to pre-order a product. Remember that this page is static, but uses revalidation. So I immediately see that I have 9 customers who pre-orders, the 9th being myself. Problem is that I've opened this page in another tab of my browser. Let's see what happened. It is still displaying 8 customers. The problem is that server-side rendering needs a refresh to be updated. Because the page is rendered on the server, the data are obtained at the moment I send an HTTP request, which happens when I open the URL. So if I hit the refresh button, I will get fresh data. And I can check that out in the network development tools. See, I'm running the request again. I check the first request, which is always the server-side render. That's the request that is triggered by your browser when you open a URL automatically. I check the content, and I see my 9 customers. So this has been statically rendered with revalidation. Now, for this kind of data, refresh is acceptable. But think of other use cases like having a real-time dashboard or a real-time chat application. You would want the data to update automatically without any user action. To be able to get fresh data automatically without having the user to refresh the page, we need client-side JavaScript to fetch the data and to update the page without a new request and response from the server. We can mix static rendering and client-side rendering. Next.js doesn't bring a specific client-side data fetching library. The choice is up to you, but one I really like is SWR. SWR is also maintained by Vercel and it has a few nice features. It's light and simple. It can update data in real time, in quasi real time, what we call polling. We are going to talk about that in the next lesson. It's compatible with the latest React features like suspense. It can handle pagination. It's agnostic to your backend. It works well with server-side rendering, static rendering. It uses TypeScript. Basically, it's a good library. I really like it. So it's a good fit for our Next.js application. Let's take a look at the code. The actual code to SWR is very simple. You have this hook, use SWR. You have the typing for this hook. We are just telling SWR that the data we receive is a count, is a JSON object containing a count field. We pass the URL to the API as the first parameter. We pass a fetcher function as the second parameter. A fetcher function is just the function that does the actual fetch call. The idea is that depending on the context, you might need different fetchers. Maybe you are using GraphQL. It's totally possible to use SWR with GraphQL. The caching mechanism will be a bit weird because SWR caches based on the URL, and in GraphQL, you have only one URL. For most APIs, you'll want to use a fetch call and expect JSON data. And you have options. And those options will be very useful in the next lesson, but for now, we are just firing the code. At the moment, my component is still using the initial count that has been computed during the static rendering or during the revalidation of the static rendering. We can see here in the page that we use a RSC count preorder function to get the count of preorders. Notice the RSC prefix, which means that this function is safe to use in a React server component. It gets the count and just passes it to my preorder section. Now, SWR is sending me data that it gets from an API route. Not that if you use client-side data fetching, you always need an additional API route to get the data. This API route is using the same function as our RSC count preorder. If I check the implementation, we can see that it is caching the count preorders function. And our API route is using the count preorders function. So they are using the same logic, one in a React server component, one in an API route that then can be later called by the client-side code. So let's replace our statically rendered initial count with the data we got from the client. I need to rebuild the application because remember that when testing static rendering in development mode, you might not be able to see what happens because the page will be rendered on every new request, like it's dynamic. It's because static can be annoying for the developer experience because it's static, so you don't see updates. So it's better to test static rendering with the built application. Now, let's run the same experimentation again. Let's pre-order the product, open the other tab, and I see 12 customers already. That's because SWR will trigger a new request when I open the tab to get fresh data. We can see it in the network. If I try again, but this time with the network development tools opened, I see a new request. SWR has been sending a new request because I've focused the page again. I've opened this tab again on my computer. That's also a good reason to use a library because it handles complex interaction like focusing on different tabs in the browser automatically.
If you want to keep learning about how to build real-world apps with the latest technologies and other career-related topics, then start right now by subscribing to our channel and liking this video.